Elizabeth Wright-Ingraham was the founder and initial director of the Wright-Ingraham Institute. She was a visionary leader and a visionary architect, and I think primarily a visionary educator. I think at core, her insights and experience and accomplishments in education may eclipse all the other terrific things that she accomplished.
My mother was very inspired to take a hiatus from her practice, her Ingram and Ingram practice. She was at odds with her legacy, her Frank Lloyd Wright legacy, in some ways, and in other ways, it was essential to who she was, and she understood that. She wanted to be doing things differently and finding different ways to design than Frank Lloyd Wright or all the other architects that are in the family.
She went to Taliesin a lot. She wanted to be a student. She wanted to do architecture, and she wanted to study with her grandfather, and they didn't let her in. And so she went to Berkeley first for undergraduate work, and then she went to the Armour Institute with Mies van der Rohe. And Mies van der Rohe was the opposite of Frank Lloyd Wright, an enemy almost. And so there was a kind of revenge thing there, but she never thought of it that way.
When I think back on that time, the 70s, it was a rather tumultuous time for the world and our country.
We lamented what was happening to Colorado Springs because we saw this beautiful, beautiful landscape, but it was being developed really fast. And so all of us that were young were seeing this development and the prairies being paved over and the encroachment on the Garden of the Gods. And so growth and the population explosion and the evolving environmental consciousness was right there in Colorado Springs for us to see. Elizabeth was saying, let's have a plan for this. Okay, we're going to have a new airport, we're going to have new highways, but there are certain regions that might be more sensitive and worth protection than others.
She also was very interested in that Front Range land because my parents had been working on that for a survey of that Front Range of Colorado as architects and planners. So she cared a lot about land. And she thought, okay, this will be the site. We're going to make this the site of this inquiry.
The 5-week summer program at the field station consisted of kind of weekly segments, consistent with John Dewey's philosophy of experiential learning. The Wright-Ingraham Institute with the field station took students out of their comfortable settings. It was camping.
When I first arrived at the field station, fresh from the Bay Area in California, I thought, oh my God, where am I? All we could see was the sky in front of us because there was nothing but sky and grass. And you would stand on the grasslands and see the horizon for 360 degrees.
So there was immediately a little bit of a survival mechanism, And this is the high plains of Colorado. It's cold at night. It's hot during the day. Incredible storms can come up. So that the whole Running Creek Field Station experience of being alone and 24 hours a day in the weather, under the stars, in the sun, made you really attentive to the details of nature. That's the immersive place-based component of Running Creek Field Station.
I'm not sure that she intended the field station to be like Taliesin, but it's true, there are some similarities. Her idea was not just architecture, though. It was more bringing different disciplines together to really have a combined conversation, learning from each other, scientists learning from biologists, natural resource water specialists talking to an ecologist, just people from different walks of life coming together and understanding the interconnection. So different than Taliesin, but they're living together, they're living off of the land.
The program focused each week on different disciplines.
We started in the beginning looking at the solar system and the mechanics of the sun and the earth and the big picture, and then sort of moving down through the natural systems and chemical systems and hydrologic systems.
And then, figure out what wildlife was there, and then factor in all the climatic conditions. And the idea that each, square meter of a grassland would generate X number of calories of energy was just like completely foreign to me.
And then we moved into cultural systems, and we began to look at archaeology and anthropology, and then that got more complicated. We began to look at economics and politics. So we saw this sort of building of all of these things connected. The politics, the economics are all tied to land and the opportunities that are in the land and the resources that are in the land.
We had a botanist on staff, Dr. Tim Tregarthen teaching economics, Linda Spickard teaching anthropology. There was someone from almost every major discipline, and they actually filled in a lot of the gaps that I had in my undergrad education.
One of the most impressive people that I met on staff or as a student was Richard Parker.
The Socratic method was very much something that he used in his teaching. He was a questioner, he was raising questions all the time about things. He just lent this huge dynamic energy, and he just contributed to Liz's dynamic energy and, just propelled things.
For me, the biggest takeaway from the Wright-Ingraham Institute was the importance of a visionary leader.
Elizabeth was not afraid to get the top experts in the world to come and speak to the students.
She had an unbelievable Rolodex and an unbelievable capacity to get people on the phone.
She didn't just invite them politely and say, won't you come to our school, our small school out here in Colorado with no electricity. It was always like, we're doing this big idea about energy and we need this number one energy person in the world. And
For example, we had a conference out at the field station, out on the decks in the open. It was literally staged as a debate with two people. One person was Alan Watts, as I recall, who was a notable environmentalist. And the other person was Edward Teller, who was the co-inventor of the hydrogen bomb. So they represented polar opposite value systems and attitudes about the role of growth and the role of the environment and technology. Liz was able to get them both out to the field station at the same time and get 100 people to come.
She was a force of nature. She had a huge amount of energy. She had incredible memory. She had a capacity for seeing the big picture.
Liz published an article in Science magazine about the field station and the whole watershed and that concept of place-based learning. Liz was on to, I think, some very innovative educational ideas.
She was always interested in educational methodology. She was willing to take people from all places, to have them talk to each other. This is part of her virtue. She had incredible intellectual curiosity about everything. And so that intellectual curiosity is very contagious. It's a contagion, you just get into it and you get excited and you just get into it and hours pass.
People wanted to do something about the environment. You have to remember the context of those times, in that the environmental movement, triggered the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. Almost every state in the Union set up their own state environmental agency. Congress passed all the major Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, waste management legislation, and so it was a very heady time for anybody that was working in the environmental field. I had basic grounding by the time I left the field station in land use planning and all of the environmental sciences that was foundational for the rest of my career at EPA.
Running Creek Field Station was only operating for 13 years, but it made a significant impact.
I think the Institute was about changing lives, changing young minds, and my mother had a love of young people for just that reason. It was life-changing for many of them. It was life-changing for me just being around that environment. There was a point in time where she said, we need to sell the land. I just need to let go of that whole thing and maybe it turns into something different.
We started to have regular board meetings and we got really serious about running the Institute when Rick Parker's father, Tom Parker, gave us a substantial gift.
It's incredible when people who are not interested per se in what you're doing, but yet see that their child is interested, and decides to funnel resources for their child to help them in this institutional effort. That was pretty incredible.
So now we have an endowment, and that's why we have a grant program, and we have the Field Stations program, which we've been piloting for the last 2 years.
And as we move forward, we're moving away from this campus-specific study of place to a kind of roving study of place, but the educational model's the same. The Running Creek Field Station experience.
The Wright-Ingraham Institute will continue to have an impact in the future by offering programs in integrative studies and systems thinking and approaches that professionals can apply in their practices. One of our most recent projects is a Field Stations program that we piloted in Colombia, South America. And I was just very proud of the fact we attracted 10 absolutely fabulous students, mostly from engineering and architecture and landscape architecture, the same disciplines that we had all grown up with.
Colombia is amazing. It is beautiful. Second most biodiverse place on Earth. And it's because of a really complex relationship of geography to the tropics. The gap between rich and poor is, I think, as great as any place on Earth. There is rapid transition of the landscape to cattle farming. We're trying to go down there and say, can we do it in a better way? And we're finding people that are saying we can do it in a better way.
I think it was proof positive that the field station approach and Elizabeth's original concepts of integrative studies tied to understanding a specific place and its ecology and its history and its anthropology and its economic drivers is still a very valuable approach to education and learning.
That's our future, right? We can help young people think differently and challenge the system and find solutions to these really thorny problems out there like climate change and environmental degradation and energy sources. That's our future. It's not me and what I do, it's the next generation. I get very excited by that, and that to me is what it's meaningful. That's what it's all about, is trying to create programs and opportunities for us to carry on that mission. I think of the work we're doing with the Institute today as whether if I had my mother sitting right next to me, what would she be saying? What would she think?
Look at the world of ideas. Look at the ideas that have manifested themselves and go to work on them.